September 6, 2018. Russia prepares after Trump forces warn of military rule and executions in response to sleeper cell awakening in White House. In what can only be described as a when will this madness end new Security Council SC report circulating in the Kremlin today, President Putin has agreed to immediately place himself under the protection of the Ministry of Defense MOD during the largest ever in the history of modern Russia war exercise Vostok 2018 due to begin on 11 September and is due to fears related to the growing crisis erupting in America that has seen a deep state-aligned sleeper cell awakening in President Trump's White House threatening to topple the existing U.S. government and that Trump-loyalist U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham rapidly responded to during a hearing, where socialist communist agitators were discovered being paid from bags of cash, when he shockingly began confirming with U.S. Supreme Court nominee Judge Brett Kavanaugh that the U.S. is now in a state of war under the full jurisdiction of military tribunals whose authority authorizes them to execute those found being enemies of the state. According to this report, the Security Council was convened in emergency session yesterday after being notified by the Foreign Intelligence Service SVR that the mysterious suspected to be U.S. military intelligence deep cover organization QAnon had suddenly gone offline shortly after they revealed that the number of sealed indictments issued by Trump's Department of Justice against deep state operatives had gone over 51,000, with the last warning message QAnon posted stating, "Fellow patriots, what you are about to learn should not only scare you, but intensify your resolve to take back control freedom. The information that will become public will further demonstrate the criminal and corrupt pure evil abuse of power that the Hussein Obama-Clinton administration undertook in joint efforts W/domestic and foreign dignitaries. The snowball has begun rolling, there is no stopping it now. D5. Stay the course and trust the plan. Protective measures are in place. Remain brave. We knew this day would come." Occurring nearly simultaneously with QAnon going offline, this report continues, a long-planned assault by President Trump against his deep state enemies, who are attempting to overthrow him in a coup, began to unfold. That included Trump's Justice Department announcing their intention to go to war against America's tech giants censoring free speech, and they're preparing to seize 15 million North Carolina voting records in an ongoing voter fraud investigation. It being announced that President Trump was preparing to declassify, by the end of this week, the FISA warrants used to spy against his campaign and, most stunningly, it being revealed that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who signed one of the illegal FISA warrants against Trump, is now under criminal investigation. After failing to stop the election of President Trump, and their then failing to stop him from taking office through electoral collage manipulation, this report details, the only three options left to the deep state to throw Trump from power were 1. Impeachment, 2. Assassination, 3. The 25th Amendment. In their knowing, however, that President Trump has protected himself from either being impeached or assassinated, this report says, the deep state, and their U.S. mainstream propaganda media allies, have waged a non-stop campaign of character assassination against him designed to portray him as being mentally unstable, out of control, and a danger to the nation, and whose goal in doing so is to unleash against Trump the 25th Amendment to the United States Constitution that allows a U.S. president to be temporarily removed from power if agreed upon by the majority of his cabinet, but only if the vice president agrees to it. 2. In support of overthrowing President Trump by the 25th Amendment, this report explains, the deep state and its aligned mainstream propaganda media puppets have vilely thrust upon the American people this past year 3 character assassination books alleging Trump is mentally unstable. Fire and Fury Inside the Trump White House, Unhinged, an insider's account of the Trump White House, and the soon-to-be-released Fear Trump in the White House. Not being told to the masses of the American people about these anti-Trump character assassination screeds, though, this report notes, Is That Fire and Fury? Author Michael Wolff is long-known disgrace and lie-teller. Unhinged author Omarosa is, also, known as an evil liar and, most dangerously, fear author Bob Woodward, who is a long-time, and greatly feared, deep state operative who was a U.S. Navy intelligence officer in the President Richard Nixon White House receiving orders from his commanding officer Rear Admiral Robert O. Welander, who would later be implicated in creating a well-documented military spy ring in the Nixon White House and who sent Woodward to the Washington Post to begin the public destruction of Nixon through media character assassination. With the commonality of these Wolff-Omarosa-Woodward character assassination screeds against President Trump being there relying only on anonymous sources whose characterizations of Trump officials have all been vehemently denied by those named, the most firm of which are made against Woodward by Generals Mattis and Kelly, and Trump attorney Dowd. This report continues, the deep state, nevertheless, have just launched their latest attack via an anonymous source, claiming to be a senior Trump official, in a New York Times op-ed article titled "I am part of the resistance inside the Trump administration." In this deep state character assassination screed against President Trump just published by the New York Times, this report details, its anonymous source concedes that Trump's accomplishments are big, levels no substantive complaints, suggests there is a government conspiracy to thwart the president, and, most dangerously, claims that Trump's cabinet has discussed invoking the 25th Amendment and whose reverberations are shaking Washington to its very core, with the White House declaring that the sleeper cells have awoken, and, as just one example, has Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist Glenn Greenwald declaring that this coward is part of an unelected cabal determined to destroy Trump at all costs. Being left virtually unnoticed in America while this latest deep state propaganda media-induced Trump firestorm consumes Washington, this report says, are the actions of President Trump. Confidant and close advisor U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, who unequivocally eviscerated this New York Times character assassination screed by his declaring this person says that there was an effort to invoke the 25th Amendment, and that's BS. I know everybody in this administration but whose words that followed is what has caused the Security Council to go into full emergency mode, and that were, Mr. President, if you are watching here tonight, if I were you, I would ignore the article. I would ignore the book and tell the American people what I've done and what I'm going to do. You've got an incredible story for less than 2 years of being president, and I think the best is yet to come. Just stay on track. You will not be affected by this book or this article. What you will be affected are the choices you make. To the choices Senator Graham is advising President Trump to stay on track about, this report grimly explains, is the most monumental and potentially catastrophic decision any U.S. president may be forced to make: the imposition of total martial law. Knowing that President Trump is being pushed by his deep state enemies and the U.S. mainstream propaganda media into the inevitability of his having to declare martial law in order to restore peace and stability to America, this report further details, Senator Graham took the extraordinary action yesterday, immediately after this New York Times hit piece was published, when he suddenly, without either context or conclusion, posed a series of questions to U.S. Supreme Court nominee Judge Kavanaugh, whose most fearful substance of was: did Judge Kavanaugh know that the United States is now in a state of war as authorized since September 18, 2001 under the provision of the Authorization for Use of Military Force (OMF)? Did Judge Kavanaugh know that the United States has both a federal and national government? Did Judge Kavanaugh know that aside from federal and national criminal laws, the United States now operates under the law of armed conflict, also known as law of war? Did Judge Kavanaugh know the significance of the U.S. Supreme Court decision Johnson v. Eisentrager that says the U.S. Constitution does not confer a right of personal security or an immunity from military trial and punishment upon an alien enemy engaged in the hostile service of a government at war with the United States? Did Judge Kavanaugh know the significance of the U.S. Supreme Court decision Hamdi v. Rumsfeld that recognized the power of the U.S. government to detain enemy combatants, including U.S. citizens? Did Judge Kavanaugh know the significance of the U.S. Supreme Court decision ex parte Quirin that allowed a U.S. military tribunal to try and execute Nazi German saboteurs captured and tried on American soil? With a somber-faced Judge Kavanaugh answering in the affirmative to all of the questions posed to him, this report explains, Senator Graham sent a chilling and unmistakable message to the deep state warning them that the United States was in a state of war whose enemies are subject to trial by military tribunals governed by the law of armed conflict whose ultimate penalty is execution, all of which is under the total and absolute power of President Trump. To the exact laws subject to U.S. military tribunals the deep state and their mainstream propaganda media allies can be tried under, this report says, are all contained in 18 U.S. Code Chapter 115, Treason, Sedition, and Subversive Activities, the most serious of which is 18 U.S. Code 2381, Treason, that says whoever, owing allegiance to the United States, levies war against them or adheres to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort within the United States or elsewhere, is guilty of treason and shall suffer death and the lesser 18 U.S. Code 2384, Seditious Conspiracy, that says if two or more persons in any state or territory, or in any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, conspire to overthrow, put down, or to destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, or by force to seize, take, or possess any property of the United States contrary to the authority thereof, they shall each be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years, or both. To anyone in the United States presently, or in the recent past, advocating for the overthrow of a legitimately and constitutionally elected president by means of making and or spreading false charges claiming that they are unable to uphold the duties of their office, this report concludes, they are, at least, guilty of conspiring to overthrow the government of the United States and whose final determiner of their fate now rests in the hands of President Trump and even whose most virulent leftist enemies have been forced to admit has no fear and makes Nixon look like a cream puff, and they're further noting that even though Trump might be in the greatest peril of his presidency, there's one thing he has going for him: he likes testing his survival skills.